know.
Time for school to begin. How are we today? You're here for a lot of information about education. This one is I guess I pretty much just said it. A lot of information about education. A lot of things that are fascinating about education, specifically in Summerville and in Dorchester County. For those that don't know, I'm Robert Scarlett, historian here at the Summerville Museum. This particular lecture was crafted by myself with the assistance of Dr. Ed West, who he doesn't like when I call him this, but I call him our lead historian here at the museum. He's a little under the weather right now, so hopefully we get him back up here pretty soon. But all the lectures we do definitely go through him, and he has a lot of history, a lot of knowledge of this area, because he's been here a lot longer than I have. In case you can't tell, I'm not from here. I'm from Philly. I've been here since 2009. Came here with the military and liked it so much, decided to, hey, let's stick around. And fortunately, my wife gave me permission to stick around, so here we are. This lecture itself covers some of the material that Dr. West and I have talked about before in a lecture series that we call Freedom Through Education in Summerville. We've learned a few more things since then that we're adding to it, but I find it all fascinating. Now, some people we've talked to in the past, when we had one lecture that was titled The Loss of Black Education in Summerville. And they would ask the question, what do you mean the loss of black education? Did they ever have it? And the answer is yes. And I'll explain how they actually had it in the past as we go into this. All right, so we're actually going to share the history of some great white Americans and black Americans and mixed Americans from this area who made education possible for people that had no formal path to gaining an education. And that's the beauty of this. Ways to get educated without having a school system all your own. So I have a few examples of African American leaders who connected education with true freedom. And as I said, as you see, freedom through education in Summerville. And you understand the freedom part in just a moment. I'll start with Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. Next, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. Anybody know who that is? Malcolm X, right? Most people just think of Malcolm, but he didn't die as Malcolm X. The name he took to the grave was El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. Once he did away with his connection to the Nation of Islam and just focused on being a true Muslim. He said, education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. I love that. And that's something I love to say to my students. Right? Those who don't know, I teach African American Studies and Human Geography at Fort Dorchester High School. I have been there for the last 4 years. Before that, I spent 9 years in Berkeley County teaching U.S. history and African American Studies out there. But I'll end with a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that connects education and a skill that we desperately need today. It was almost as though Dr. King knew how politics would be in the future, how it would be conducted, and the corrosive influence of social media as it would happen today. This is what he said. He said, to save man from the morose of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the fact from the fiction. This is a man speaking before something. So imagine how true that is today, especially in our politics today, right? When you think about it. Today, every child in Summerville, regardless of their ethnicity, has an equal opportunity to gain a quality education if they're willing to pay attention.
Yes.
Right? And actually try to get it. Right? That wasn't always the case here in the South. The denial of educational opportunities during and after slavery's era produced a majority illiterate African American population. which, sadly, led to the denial of true freedom. True freedom can only be exercised when you read and understand your rights, when you can fill out a voter registration card or a job application, or can read and understand the curriculum needed to pursue the career that you want. That's true freedom. That's what education is supposed to bring us. History teaches us that black illiteracy was not the norm. The image you see here is Sankore Mosque in the African nation of Mali. Today we call it the University of Timbuktu. This was a university in Africa in the year 989. 989, they had a university. They had a law school. They had a bookstore. All right, 989. So they've been doing this for a long time. This was the fourth university to ever exist in the world, was in ancient Africa. Right? So that's what bothers me. They were the earliest scientists. Africans were the earliest farmers, the earliest mathematicians, the earliest explorers, the earliest writers. These were all Africans, especially when you go back and look at the history of places like ancient Egypt. You see all this. I always tease my students and say, don't get mad at the Africans, but yes, they invented geometry. The students are like, oh, I hate them. I hate them, right? So what happened? How did some of the most educated people in the world suddenly become these ignorant savages of American folklore? How did that happen? Clearly, slave owners in South Carolina, they understood, at least by the way they used the enslaved, that they were not ignorant savages. Many enslavers used their enslaved Africans as bookkeepers, secretaries, shop managers, etc. Why pay for a secretary or a bookkeeper when you own one? So they would educate them, teach them how to read and write, so they could do those jobs for them without having to pay a white person to do it. So what changed? Why did stifling the education of black people become the norm? Simple. Fear. Fear is the answer to that question. It is difficult to enslave educated people. Frederick Douglass once said, knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. But what's interesting is that Frederick Douglass did not make that up himself. Frederick Douglass was quoting his enslaver. When Frederick Douglass was around 12 years old, his master's wife started teaching him how to read and write until she got caught by her husband. He said, woman, knock it off. We don't do that. We can't do that. And his master said, learning will spoil the best nigger in the world. If he learns to read the Bible, it will forever unfit him to be a slave. He would at once become unmanageable and no value to his master. As to himself, it could do him no good, but a great deal of harm. It would make him discontent and unhappy. Translation: an educated person can recognize when they are being intentionally held back for the benefit of others. They become rightfully discontent, realizing they deserve access to careers and opportunities that match their level of education and their level of ability. That's why they're discontent. That is why knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. And knowledge makes a man or woman dissatisfied with minimum wage or lower management positions. Now that can disrupt the system. A system that depends on you being so appreciative of the scraps that you never question why you don't have access to the full meal. And that is what we often hear. They should appreciate what they got. They should appreciate what we've given them. Aren't they happy with what they have? Would you be? Would you be satisfied with anything less than your full potential being realized? So why should they? Why should they? The fear I mentioned was well-founded. In American history, there is documented evidence of more than 300 slave revolts. There were many other ways of revolting, but in this particular case, the government classified a slave revolt as one where they can show that at least 10 enslaved people participated in the revolt. As her phone's going off, let me make sure I'm on under. So she did better than I did. See? Yes, I know this Dr. Morse Grass. I love listening to him. It's a good time. So, excuse me. 300 slave rebellions in the United States. Here are two examples. These are local examples. Hopefully you learned about these in school. I'm always bothered by people that came all the way up through South Carolina and never heard about these South Carolina slave revolts. Right? Don't get me started on a race ride. Yeah, don't get me started. I won't even go there. Okay, I'll get off track really fast. The first was the Stoner Rebellion in 1739. Has anybody had never heard of that? Hopefully everybody here at least got that. You never heard of it?
But I grew up north.
Okay. So did I. And I didn't learn about it either. Right? Stoner Rebellion in 1739 took place less than 20 miles from Charleston, along with today is Highway 17 South. When about 20 enslaved people, led by a man named Jimmy from Angola, gathered at a spot near the Stoner River. Their first stop was Hutchison's store. Name Hutchison? We'll get to that in a moment. So they stopped at Hutchison's store, where they killed two shopkeepers, chopped their heads off, placed their heads on the front steps of the store. These brothers weren't hiding. They weren't hiding. They grabbed guns and ammunition and other supplies they thought they might need. Now, as far as Hutchison is concerned, Edward Hutchison, Summerville's first intendant, today we call them mayors, that is who Hutchison Square is named after. He's a descendant of the wealthy planters, rice planters, who migrated from the low-lying Stoner River areas in the 18th and 19th centuries and settled here in Summerville, same family. Now, during the Stoner Rebellion, these escaped Africans, they weren't hiding, as I said. They were carrying signs that read, "Liberty!" And they were beating drums to try to attract others to come and join them. And by the time they got to the end of this, they had nearly 100 people as part of their march. Where were they going? Anybody know?
Florida.
Florida. They're trying to get to Florida. Because the Spanish owned Florida at the time, and the Spanish hate the British. Like, hey, if you can escape here, you're free. You just got to join the Spanish army and help us kick those British butts. But we set up a whole encampment for you called Fort Mosaic, where you can live in peace away from slavery. But their route intersected with the main road used to come to Summerville. Today it is called Delamar Highway. So one turn could have led them through here, which would not have been very good for the plantations that we had at the time here in Summerville. So how did they get stopped? What ended up happening? It wasn't fun for them. After discovering the rebels, the lieutenant governor of South Carolina accidentally discovered them when he and friends were riding by on horseback. Accidentally discovered them. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't stop him, tried to chase him down, but he got by us. Went to a local church, built a militia, because they had a law at the time that they had just started, where all men had to carry guns to church. For just, what do you think? If I need you, modern day Minuteman. Well, you know, it was actually before the Minuteman. But carry your guns to church. So gathered up a militia, went, and they defeated this group of enslaved people. So they tried to scatter, tried to run away. Some tried to go back to their old plantation, just slip in bed. Like nothing ever happened. But they were caught. And in the end, about 25 whites had been murdered, mainly on those plantations, because as this mob walked by these plantations, they would raid the plantation, kill the whites that were there, set the enslaved free, gather whatever guns, weapons, and supplies they could, and they keep going, doing that, trying to make their way all the way to Spanish Florida. But 50 enslaved people were killed during that attack by the militia. And what they did was, think of Hutchinson Square or Hutchinson Store, they chopped off their heads, they put their heads on spike, and they lined Highway 17 with their severed heads to try to dissuade anyone else from doing that again. So, after that, fear led to South Carolina amending the existing slave codes and introducing the 1740 Slave Act, also called the Negro Act. Here's a passage that speaks directly to today's topic, and I quote, "Whereas the having of slaves taught to write, or suffering them to be employed in writing, may be attended with great inconveniences, be it therefore enacted by the authority aforesaid, that all and every person and persons whatsoever who shall hereafter teach or cause any slave or slaves to be taught to write, or shall use or employ any slave as a scribe, and any manner of writing whatsoever hereafter taught to write, every such person and persons shall for every such offense forfeit the sum of 100 pounds current money." Now, that's a lot of money back then. So you mess around and train up your own bookkeeper if you want, but it's going to cost your business $100 every time we catch you doing that, or 100 pounds. So this legislation casts an enslaved person's ability to write as a potential threat to the colony. The second part of that lesson involved a man hanged by local authorities, not for what he did, but what others say he planned to do. When we discuss the penalties imposed in the Vesey conspiracy of 1822, Denmark Vesey is the man here, Vesey. When we discuss those penalties, we see a connection to that 1739 slave rebellion that led to the 1740 Negro Act. The trial report reports the following from the 1740 Negro Act that formed the basis for the penalties that Vesey and his conspirators were charged with. The Negro Law of 1740 was enacted in consequence of the last. This is a quote from the court case. And the last is reference to the Stoner Rebellion, also known as the Gullah War, and has proved our security from that period, notwithstanding the occasional effervescence of insubordination. So basically they're saying, we started these rules to be able to stop them. Every once in a while they still show out. But for the most part, we've shut them down. We've shut down any other rebellions. Vesey's planned rebellion fell apart when an enslaved man who just loved it, his master, warned his master about the plan and that Vesey and his men were coming. So they were captured. But during the next 2 months, some 130 blacks were arrested. 67 were convicted. Of these, 35, including Vesey, were hanged, and 32 were condemned to exile. So as with the Stoner Rebellion, this event led to greater restrictions on the enslaved and free black people. One of those restrictions included denial of the right to some form of literacy. It also became illegal for them to use any percussion instruments. They could no longer use drums because they used that to communicate. So they shut that down as a form of communication. So after the Revolutionary War, during which over 5,000 African Americans fought with George Washington's army, the Negro Act was made perpetual. Though the document was occasionally revised, it survived all the way up to the Civil War, basically intact. Meaning our new nation began with the same prohibition against blacks being allowed to learn to write, which I personally cannot logically disconnect from the right to learn to read. Although the 1740 Act does not specifically outlaw reading. I have to say that because somebody challenged me on that once. It doesn't say they couldn't read. It said they couldn't learn to write. I'm like, okay, if you can separate that in your mind, go ahead. I'll say exactly what the law says and make that logical leap for myself. So all right, that should establish how fear contributed to the denial of educational opportunities for many African Americans in Summerville and the surrounding areas. But let me go back a bit to chronicle the beautiful history of educational opportunities in the Dorchester County area a bit more holistically. The first free school successfully established in South Carolina was founded in Charleston in 1710 and opened in 1712 as the Free School or the Charlestown Free School. Why was it called the Free School? Well, in 18th century British colonial context, a free school did not mean universal free education for everyone. Instead, it meant a school supported by public funds or charitable gifts where poor, orphaned, or indigent, oh, I was messing up that word, indigent children could attend without paying tuition, while wealthier families had to pay fees to help fund the schoolmaster's salary. But still, black students were not allowed to attend. Something that Dr. Ed West shared with me helps us understand the true beginning of free education in South Carolina. He shared that most of the history of Western public education was inspired by the ideas of the Reformation, which, if you remember your high school history, was a religious movement. The 16th century religious movement that started the Protestant church. The colonial free schools in this area were directly associated with the main colonial religions, Anglicanism and Calvinism. The evangelists of the Reformation wanted everyone to be able to read the Bible. That's what education, the purpose of education for them was everyone needed to be able to read the Bible. That was their focus. For example, they refer to a couple of passages. Titus, 2nd chapter, verses 9 through 10. Bond servants are to be submissive to their own masters in everything. They are to be well-pleasing, not argumentative, not pilfering, but showing all good faith, so that in everything they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior. Clearly, they were using the Bible to control enslaved Africans who were Christians. And the scripture, Psalms 119:45. I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. I actually like this passage. Pastor speaks more directly to our message today. God was saying true freedom comes through education. In this case, educating oneself and the peace that comes through learning and following God's plan. True education. In 1700, Carolina planters thought Christian conversion of their enslaved workforce would tend to support the social system. So they were okay with educating the enslaved, both for practical business purposes as well as for preserving the peace. Unfortunately, secret written communications were believed to be a big part of the Stonewall Rebellion, so they had to shut it down. Fortunately, the Society for Propagating the Gospel in Foreign Parts started a school in Goose Creek and another at Colonial Dorchester in 1724. These schools included and specifically targeted black students, both enslaved and free, as well as Native Americans. So that's the first time in this area we really see somebody intentionally, lawfully or not, it's the church, they do what they want to do, educating people of color. Beginning in the 19th century, South Carolina Free School Act of 1811, officially titled An Act to Establish Free Schools Throughout the State, authorized the establishment of free schools in every election district across South Carolina. That would include Summerville as part of Colleton County at that time. We weren't always part of Dorchester County. Priority placement was given to poor orphans and children of indigent parents. That means they were broke. But once again, black children were explicitly excluded from attending these schools. In 1724, the nation's first school board, called the Dorchester Free School Board, was established at Colonial Dorchester to provide free education funded through donations. The first Dorchester Free School opened in 1758 at Colonial Dorchester and remained active until 1818 when the operation was moved here to Summerville. The school stood on the corner of Central Avenue and Dorchester Street, where it continued until the Civil War. In 1906, The board erected an elementary school, which operated until 1912, when the land was sold and the school became a public school. The Dorchester Free School Board, that is the oldest continuously operating school board in American history. And it still operates today, the Dorchester Free School Board. Their focus now is, they don't have any schools. Their focus now is providing scholarships for kids to go to college. So it still exists today. I now want to focus on the incredible educational opportunities for African Americans, poor whites, and Native Americans made available by generous residents of this great city of Summerville, beginning with the Civil War era. The first example celebrates African American contributions during the U.S. Civil War, during which more than 180,000 Black Americans answered the call to fight in the Civil War. Part of that 180,000 included the 35th United States Colored Troops who served here in Summerville, camping basically in the area where the Rollins School of the Arts is located today. Who never knew there were colored troops stationed in Summerville during the Civil War? Yeah, most people never knew that, right? Never knew that. They were stationed right here in Summerville. And I won't talk about them today, but in another lecture, I talk about the fact that Buffalo soldiers were stationed in Summerville. Colonel Charles Young led a battalion right here in Summerville. That's interesting. You can find that lecture online at the museum. I like that kind of stuff. All right, so raise your hand if you can tell me who Harriet Beecher Stowe was and why she was important to American history. Sir?
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Uncle Tom's Cabin. Very good. Uncle Tom's Cabin. She educated Northern whites about the horrors of slavery in the book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Turned many in the North who had ignored slavery in the past into strong abolitionists. Black units like the 35th faced a multitude of obstacles, including racism from white Union soldiers and white Union officers. But they were lucky in that regard. They were led by a man whose family name is synonymous with abolitionism. Colonel James Chaplain Beecher was half-brother of Harriet Beecher Stowe. Colonel Beecher and many of his officers championed the rights of their men and worked to improve their situation. He commanded the 35th. This is him here. According to the regiment's official descriptive book, the regiment included 1,098 men who served over the years. The unit was made up of formerly enslaved and free blacks of all ages. Men enlisted as young as 15 and as old as 67. See, you can join, brother.
Yeah, 68.
Sorry. Thanks for offering. Dang. What a year makes.
So the unit saw action in Honey Hill and DeVoe Neck, South Carolina in 1864. One sad story includes a man by the name of Benjamin Grambley. Benjamin Grambley survived all the battles of the 35th, and in 1866 died of smallpox in the camp hospital here in Summerville. There used to be a hospital in Summerville during the war. On June 1st, 1866, the 35th disbanded after 3 years of service in the Union Army. Both whites and blacks saw how black soldiers made efforts to improve themselves by learning how to read and write. In an article published in the 1898 magazine that is held in this museum's Research Center Archives, in case you don't know, we are the Summerville Museum and Research Center. We have a research library upstairs on the history of Summerville. So we have that particular magazine, and they let me hold on to it for too long, so it's not as good shape as it used to be. Reading that sucker, and pages were just coming apart, so you gotta be careful with old documents like that. In the article, Colonel Beecher's wife talked about how she educated the members of her husband's unit. She says, and I quote, "My mornings were spent in teaching the men of our regiment to read and write, and it became my pleasing duty and habit, wherever our moving tents were pitched, there to set up our school. The result was that when the men came to muster out, each one of them could proudly sign his name to the payroll in a good legible hand. Whenever they had a spare moment, out would come a spelling book or a primer or testament, and you would often see a group of heads around one book." Her efforts did not stop after the unit was disbanded. After the Union Army took command of Charleston, public schools were established, and Frances Beecher Perkins became principal pro tem of one of those schools. According to her, the school had 30 teachers and 600 students. And I love this part. They had 1 floor of all white students and 3 floors of black students. I love that. I love that aspect of it. Well, I mean, they were hungry. They wanted that education they had been denied for so long. So things were clearly looking up for many of those newly educated men. One article written from, what's the name of the newspaper? South Carolina Leader. Does that still exist? The South Carolina Leader was the name of this particular newspaper. In an article, he wrote, "At Summerville, they're opening the schools and striving by all means in their power to get knowledge and fit themselves for a better life than has been the lot of some heretofore. The schools are under the charge of Mrs. Beecher and Miss Parker and are well conducted. The roads and bridges are being repaired, and the town is coming up to its old standard." When they talk about bridges, one of the things we like to talk about here about the 35th is that after the Civil War, they rebuilt Bacon's Bridge. It had been blown up during the war. They rebuilt it. Things were clearly looking up for many of these newly educated men. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from them directly. We have copies of the letters sent by a couple of the men of the 35th United States Colored Troops to a local newspaper. Here is one example. A Negro sergeant of the regiment writes optimistically about the future because of the opportunities granted to him through education. Here is a part of what he said. "Mr. Editor, I feel like there is a good time coming when not only the citizens of the U.S., but all citizens shall enjoy the rights of American citizenship. But I can say that Company G, 35th Regiment, are doing now what they should have done long ago, and that is to get an education. We can boast of a first-rate teacher, and I hope that God will bless him, and likewise our captain. We are enjoying ourselves here very much in dividing our attention pretty equally between the useful and the ornamental." Signed, Sergeant C.W. Pugh, Company G, 35th Regiment. It's impressive to see someone who used to be a slave writing articles now into a newspaper, talking about his future being brightened, the fact that he gained an education. I can only get that through my students. Get that through their heads. It would be all right. Now this is the area where y'all gonna have to help me, those that have been here for a while. The schools created by Chaplain Beecher and his wife facilitated the success of other endeavors in Summerville, including an institution known as Miss Hosmer's School. Has anyone ever heard of Miss Hosmer's School in Summerville?
Robert, is that a misspelling off of the
Yes, it is.
tombstone?
No. That's a misspelling off of Mr.
Yeah, that's
Scarlett.
what I mean there, H-O-S.
Hosmer is right. Hosner is my mess up. So Hosmer is correct.
You're welcome.
Now you must join the military. Okay, so Miss Jane Hosmer, identified as Mary Hosmer in the Columbia Law Review, was appointed by the New England Freedmen's Aid Society to teach freed people in South Carolina. Her school gained national attention within aid societies because she petitioned for and received permission to educate both newly freed black children and impoverished local white children under the same roof, making it one of the rare integrated primary school experiments in Reconstruction era South Carolina. Mr. E.B. Adams, agent of the AFU Commission of Georgia and Alabama, changed his opinion about the possibility of establishing schools in the South, irrespective of caste or color, after observing the success of the Hosmer School. Mr. Adams wrote the following statement. I will touch on the relevant parts. In Summerville, South Carolina, within 20 miles of Charleston, there is a most successful scheme open to all classes and patronized by all. I refer to Miss Hosmer's School, which I visited in April. I found about 60 pupils in attendance. About 30 of these were white and 30 black. They sat upon the same seats, studied from the same books, recited in the same classes, took the same recess, and played the same games. Not expecting to find so great a success, I wondered how it was achieved. General Beecher, the commander of the district, and his wife have done much for the success of this school. It's amazing to see that. Here are a few examples, or a few quotes from the Daily Journal of the New England Freedmen's Aid Society concerning Ms. Hosmer's school. In the Society's secretary's handwritten record from 1865 and 1866, we see some comments that came from the Summerville site. Here are a few. December 19th, Ms. Harriet Buttrick and Ms. Hosmer are boarding with Ms. Beecher, Mrs. Beecher. General Beecher is going to build a schoolhouse soon. That just shows that connection between that military component. We're going to house the teachers until we can get them a facility. That's that support. Second one, very interesting letter from Ms. Hosmer, Summerville. Has in her school 6 colored girls over 18 years of age who hope to become teachers. They get along very pleasantly together. Describes the white children as most piteous objects. How raggedy do you have to be? For the old black women like, ooh, baby, how poor are you? Right? So I found that one humorous. And last, a letter from Miss Hosmer. The whites find no difficulty in reciting side by side with blacks, and a spirit of entire goodwill exists. I always talk about in my class that children have to learn to hate. They don't come out naturally hating. All they see is another playmate. Hey, you want to play? Let's go. You got to teach them hate. Also in Summerville, we find the Stevenson School. Anybody ever heard of that? Finding these are little gems. I just love it. Constructed around 1868, which was located on Red Hill. Right know where that is? On Red Hill, near the barracks of the 35th United States Colored Troops. On property owned by Joseph Sasportis. You ever heard that name before? I'm actually talking to a descendant of Joseph Sasportis now. And we're working on putting together family history. Because this was a black family that owned several stores in the early 1800s here in Summerville. There's a Sasportis Lane in this city that you can drive down. And I get more information on where that came from and present a lecture on the Sasportis family and that connection to Summerville. So he wants to know more about his family. Like, I want to know too. Can I use it for a lecture? Like, yeah, of course. Let's get this thing together. I'm like, cool. Let's go. He's in Savannah. We're just talking on the phone. And I love that. So if you guys have stuff you're interested in, call the museum. They'll get the information to me. We can talk. See what we're going to put together. I'm always asking people, please give us more ideas of what you want to learn about in Summerville. But I digress. So the Stevenson School, on the property of the 35th United States Colored Troops. Prominent black property owner of Summerville. That's who Joseph Sasportis was. Local freed families contributed labor, materials, and modest funds to ensure their teachers and their children have access to literacy and basic education. As you'll see in the history of Summerville, Summerville has come together so many times to help so many people. That's why I love talking about Summerville, is all of the people here that have come together. If you look at any of my earlier lectures, you'll see a lot of conversations about how Summerville was somewhat of a safe haven during the Jim Crow era. And this is coming from the black people, the 90-year-old black people that I talked to that grew up here. But yeah, we didn't have those problems here. If you went downtown Charleston, yeah, different story. But here in Summerville, we all just got along. So I love that about Summerville. Okay. Although I just discussed some positive examples, following the Civil War, there were some major setbacks to education for African Americans brought about through what was known as the lost cause narrative. Anybody ever heard that expression before? The lost cause narrative. And later, Jim Crow segregation. First, a disclaimer. I fully understand that many in the South, and probably many in this room, have relatives who proudly fought for the Confederacy. I fully support the celebrations of one's heritage. Doesn't matter what your grandpapa did. Dr. West comes from a Confederacy background, right? Can't blame him for anything. So celebrate your heritage. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's learn from our history as well. I tell my students at the beginning of each year that history is written by the victors. The winners of wars get to tell their version of the story. The United States Civil War was the only war that violated that basic principle. In this case, it was the losers who dominated the storytelling in the South and even influenced what students in the North learned about the war. By the 1930s, the so-called mint julep, or pro-Confederate portrayal of figures, including John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated President Abraham Lincoln, and Nathan Bedford Forrest, Confederate general responsible for the slaughter of surrendering black troops at the Fort Pillow Massacre, and he's the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. They were redefined in our history books in the South as men who were just misunderstood. Thing I love in these textbooks is when it lists George Washington and Thomas Jefferson as abolitionists. Yeah, go ahead, girlfriend, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm like, what history are you reciting? All right, let's go back in time a little bit. After the Civil War, public schooling became more widespread. In South Carolina, the 15th Amendment gave black men the right to vote, leading to an African-American dominated state house. Yes, up in Columbia, the House of Representatives was majority black after the Civil War, after the 15th Amendment, majority black. This group passed the 1868 state constitution that mandated public schools for all children in the state. Although it was never funded, local private schools and some public schools began to appear. Throughout the South, though, the United Daughters of the Confederacy heavily influenced what appeared in textbooks by lobbying Southern legislatures. Here in Summerville lived a man named William Gilmore Simms. Mr. Simms was the primary author of South Carolina's history textbooks, which were used in South Carolina public schools until about 1980. You remember those, the Simms readers? Yes. Those books supported the lost cause narrative. Today, most of the states with statewide textbook policies are still in the South. Me personally, I took part in the last rewrite of the South Carolina State Standards for U.S. history. We spent the week, yeah, good that I was there, but the story doesn't end as well. Because one session, I'm kind of getting off topic, but one session I'm sitting there, I'm like, we need to include this. It was the convict leasing system into our history. And one woman actually told me, you only want that because you're black. Woo! I started to let her have it. And my wife's like, yeah, I can only imagine. And from the University of South Carolina, Dr. Valerie Littlefield. You know Val, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Valerie Littlefield. She grabbed me, Robert. I got this. And then she started saying things a lot nicer than I was about to say them. But what bothered me is we had a very diverse history standard that we produced. Right? Yes, my name still appears at the end of the South Carolina Standards as an editor of the standards. But a lot of stuff I fought for, see, after it goes from the teachers, it goes through the politicians. Right. And they have the final rewrite. And most of what I fought for never got in the final standards. I still teach it in my classes. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, right.
But it's not in the standards. It was removed from what we agreed on. So that's what's frustrating when educators say this is what we need. Right? I was also on the textbook adoption committee for the state. What textbooks are we going to use? In this case, I was teaching AP US history at the time, A-Push. And we agreed this textbook is extremely racist. We need to throw this book out. We can't use this book. So we all get together, agree as a committee, these are the books that are available to the schools. School year starts. Scarlett, here's your textbook. It's the one that we banned as a committee. It's the only one that was offered for me to teach. So I just didn't use the textbook. I'm not using this book. Right? But that's the kind of stuff that we have still going on today. Right? Trying to fix and get accurate information in our history books, but we got to go through the politicians. Right? When I first started in Dorchester District 2, I taught AP, African American Studies, Advanced Placement African American Studies, for 1 year. Then South Carolina banned it. So that's the kind of stuff we're still dealing with, even today. So okay, I won't get too far off this. But they depicted in their history books, as you see on the one on the far left, that enslaved people were happy and content. Officials even counted the textbook lines to make sure authors had mentioned Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee as many times as Abraham Lincoln or Ulysses S. Grant. For decades, Southerners studied a version of the Civil War that all but ignored the experiences of the enslaved and glorified the actions of Confederate leaders. There is one, the other one. Yeah, I love this one. I gotta highlight this one. How the Negro lived under slavery. On the boat, dressed in a suit, with a hat.
Shaking hands.
Welcome to America.
Yeah. Right.
That's a textbook. You think that's how we got here? I don't think we arrived looking like that. Kids all dressed nice, hair done, wife got a bonnet on. Welcome to America. But when you're a child and that's what you're taught, you believe it. So that's why a lot of people, I don't understand. I have a neighbor. I'm gonna run over time.
All right.
It's just the way I teach. I'm in that same way in my classroom. I have a neighbor. I won't say his name. He came to me one day and he said, "Robert, can I ask you a question?" This is my best white guy impression. And he's from Boston. I gotta put a little twang in there too, right?
Okay.
He's from Boston. And he said, and he didn't realize his first statement was offensive. I didn't tell him it was offensive. He said, "Robert, you're probably the most intelligent black guy I know. When you start a conversation like that, I'm like, oh boy, what's coming?" He said, "I don't get this racism stuff. I've never seen it." I said, "You never will. You grew up in this all-white neighborhood in Massachusetts. When were you going to see it?" Right? Because this was during that whole George Floyd thing. They talking about there's racism. I've never seen it.
We had busing. It was like huge, right?
Well, he's only like 32, so
Oh.
yeah, he missed a lot of that. He missed all that. So yeah, it blows my mind what people are thinking today. But here we go. Check this out. Oh, I was already there. Despite my comments about the South, believe it or not, we Yankees have some false assumptions of our own that we need to deal with. Say it's not so. And me and my wife are both Yankees. Philadelphia, Trenton, New Jersey. Right? I had to go there. So when I was doing research that involved South Carolina during Reconstruction, for another lecture, I had to confront an uncomfortable bias of my own. In this book titled South Carolina Negroes, 1877 to 1900, very good book, I was reading about Wade Hampton as a candidate for governor of South Carolina. Now, in my mind, I can stop right there. Wade Hampton would represent South Carolina during Reconstruction. That meant I hated him. I didn't know anything about him, but the formula says black man plus Reconstruction plus Southern governor equals I hate him. It's kind of the rules of this thing, right? Why did I have to keep reading? You see, true historians go where the facts lead them, not where public opinion or voter polls tell them to go. So here's a quote attributed to candidate Wade Hampton when he ran for governor in 1876 that I had to contend with. Not one single right enjoyed by the colored people today shall be taken from them. They shall be equals under the law of any man in South Carolina. And we further pledge that we will give better facilities for education than they have ever had before. What? Dude, you're making it really hard for me to hate you. All right? Knock it off. Now, we have seen in recent election cycles how politicians will say anything to marginalized communities to get their vote. But once elected, they forget about, demote, fire, or illegally deport those very same citizens after the election. But as governor, Wade Hampton continued to fight against the extremists in his party and tried to ensure African Americans had their place in government and voting. Messed up my whole paradigm. Man, I had to rethink about the day. But ultimately, any chance we had was stripped away after the presidential election of 1876. And what followed, which became known as the Compromise of 1877, that basically led to the end of Reconstruction, removing federal troops out of the South. The last ones to leave was South Carolina. Out of the South, those federal troops were the ones that were protecting the newly freed African Americans and protected them at the voting booth where they could vote and end up dominating the State House. But once those troops left, so did our protection. So truly appreciate the things that we had then. The end of Reconstruction and the curtailment of rights for African Americans continued for the next 90 years. The next 90 years before we got any semblance of those rights back in the 1960s. So, before I even say this, to truly appreciate Wade Hampton, you simply have to look at the actions of the man who replaced him, Benjamin Tillman, who quickly carried to completion the elimination of Negroes from having any place in South Carolina politics. Quickly missed Wade Hampton. The next educational opportunity, back to the good stuff. We get positive again here. Back to the good stuff. The next educational opportunity connects to why Summerville celebrates itself as the creators of sweet tea. Anybody ever see that gigantic glass of sweet tea we got back in that building? You never seen it? Go check it out. It's like 12 feet tall, whatever. Giant. So this celebration would not have been possible without Summerville's Pinehurst tea plantation and his brilliant curator and their educated tea pickers. In 1888, Dr. Charles Shepard founded the Pinehurst tea plantation. He experimented with teas that he brought back from studying tea cultivation in the Orient. To give you an idea of what type of man he was, when Dr. Shepard was asked, what is the sport, amusement, form of exercise, or mode of relaxation which you enjoy and find helpful? He replied, charity schools for both races. Dr. Shepard put those sentiments into action. Instead of exploiting African Americans as Reconstruction came to an end in the South, Dr. Shepard made a deal with black families. He said if black families would allow their children to pick tea at the plantation, the children would be paid a fair wage and he would provide them with a free education. When the children were not harvesting the tea, they were in schools that Dr. Shepard provided, honoring the pledge that he made to their parents. To make this happen, Dr. Shepard paid the salaries for a teacher and an assistant. In addition, he paid for the building and bought the textbooks. A woman named Arlene Singleton spent several years as a tea picker and student at Pinehurst. According to her, all the school children picked tea after they were about 12 or 13 years old. She went on to say picking began in May, with the larger children starting first. Then as school let out, the younger ones started, and all continued until the hot weather was over. After Dr. Shepard's death in 1915, the plantation closed, and the tea just grew wild for the next 45 years. Later, cuttings from these plants were taken to create the fields of both the American Tea Growing Company and the Charleston Tea Plantation. We also have some of those plants in our garden. We have tea plants growing right outside these doors in our garden. So the Pinehurst Tea Picker School was already in operation about 5 to 8 years before the St. Barnabas Mission was established, which is our next topic. Our story starts with a historic landmark here in Summerville, St. Paul's Church. In 1883, Pastor LeGrand F. Geary decided to grow the church by reaching out to the people in the more rural areas. This included a group of people that he referred to as the Summerville Indians, because they were believed to be mixed-race descendants of local Native American tribes. The first service was held in this local house. The so-called Summerville Indians were reclusive and lived on the margins of settled areas. As the congregation grew, the church built a small building on a vacant lot. This picture may have been the original building. Now, this family here is a family of Summerville Indians. I only learned later that the mom and 3 boys, there was 2 more boys inside, and the husband was like, "You ain't taking my picture." And he wouldn't let the little ones go outside to get their picture taken. This was done by somebody, famous, I forget her name, photographer, and all these images are now in the Library of Congress. So I've served for years as a teaching mentor with the Library of Congress. So it's easy to go in there and get some materials for stuff like this. So in addition to church services, they used the building as a school. The chance at freedom through education caused many local Indians and poor whites to flock to the school. Soon that building was too small. It was known as the Red School of St. Barnabas Mission. Primarily served 2 isolated tribes of Somerville Indians, the Wassamasaw and the Edisto or Natchez Coosa. Recognize that name. We met at the Coosa Reservation. My favorite person to talk about in Somerville. This is where one of the museum's favorite heroines comes into play. Her name was Catherine B. Smith Springs, but we affectionately know her as Kitty Springs. She was an astute businesswoman and property owner. Her husband was a merchant in Hutchinson Square. He was a white man. She owned a dress shop on King Street in downtown Charleston, and later also owned property in Hutchinson Square, which is now the old post office. She had been involved with the St. Barnabas Mission for many years. Various sources report that Kitty was a multiracial heritage, mainly Black and Native American. It is believed her multicultural identity influenced her with the desire to help the local American Indians and the poor of all ethnic groups. To help the cause of education for the Summerville Indians, Kitty Springs donated land, mortgaged one of her cottages, and took out a loan to gather funds for the new building. Construction of the chapel began around October 1887 and was built at the intersection of North Main Street and Highway 78 in Summerville. The Red School, as it is often called, operated from 1883 until the 1930s and 40s when the students were forced to go into the regular integrated school system, or the regular public school system, not integrated, the regular public school system. She also was involved in our, well, let me explain this image. This is upstairs in what we call the Summerville History Room. That's where you find that desk and this bell and the chalkboard the kids used to write on, and the reading material, all that stuff. Find that upstairs in our Summerville History Room. But a man named Mr. Melfi, great artist, created this glass image of Epiphany Church. And next to Epiphany Church is a monument to Kitty Springs. So she provided the land and the money to build that church. So it's right across, if you know where the Tim Rod Library is, right across the street is Epiphany Church. And
That's our church.
Everybody's invited to come 9 o'clock Sunday morning.
And I want to go there at least once just for the history of it. I've been outside taking pictures of the monument.
You gotta go.
but I'd like to attend service.
Come on, second Sunday, we have breakfast.
Second Sunday, oh, food.
Yeah, good food.
You like breakfast?
Lots of it.
The organist is our neighbor.
Dr. Charles Lee.
Dr.
Yeah.
Goodman. Yeah.
So Katy Springs didn't stop there. She, along with Dr. Charles Shepard, funded the Bank School for Negro children in Summerville. The school was operated by Epiphany Episcopal Church. It was located on Central Avenue, next door to what is now St. Luke's Lutheran Church. Katy Springs donated land to establish both the church and the school around 1887. I'm sure y'all talk about her in the church.
We have Katy Springs Day
Hey,
every year,
I love that.
and we have a banner that features.
Y'all gotta reach out and let me know when that is.
Okay.
We will.
I will
Yeah.
attend
Yeah.
Katy
Please.
Springs Day. I'd be honored to attend that. Okay, what else? The Bank School, later the George Washington Carver Library. Anybody ever see that when they were younger? George Washington Carver Library? We're still trying to find, we think we know where it is, but it's behind some house, like where the Timberline Library is. Behind that, there's houses, supposedly the remnants are behind that. So I went out there one day, poking around, walking in white people's backyards. That's not something a brother from Philly does comfortably. So maybe if y'all know any families back there behind the Timberline, you know anybody, hook a brother up. Let him know he's good. He's safe. So if y'all know somebody, let me know. I want to check it out. I want to see what's back there. Can't take my wife if she worries about snakes.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm with you. Yeah.
So the Bank School served as the primary educational facility for African American children in the area, including our own Rollins Edwards, which we have a great display for him upstairs as well. If you don't know Rollins Edwards, he was a World War II veteran in Summerville, part of a black unit where the government tested chemical warfare weapons on the black men. And he was damaged for the rest of his life. So I do there's a lecture in there on him as well, but yeah, horrifying story on what they did to those men. But he actually came and lectured here. He passed away a few years ago, and I was at the lecture when he did a lecture here about his experiences. Incredible. He owned a dry cleaners in Summerville for 40 years. Yeah. Until he finally, at the end of that 40 years, he finally got military disability granted. He finally recognized that in the day he got his disability approved, he shut down the store. He never worked another day. Well, understandably so. But yeah, that's a great history. But they had that school until Dr. J.H. Austin, which is a black doctor, and Dr. Charles Shepard founded and created the Austin Graded School. Austin Graded School was a 2-story wooden building constructed at West First North and North Cedar Streets. A new 1-story school made of brick was built on Bryan Street to replace the original school for the 1952-53 school year, and closed due to desegregation in 1970. The original wooden building was demolished, but the school on Bryan Street continues today as Austin Middle School. That building is still there. But I always like to take note of the fact that segregation officially ended in 1954, but in South Carolina in 1970. I'll leave it right there. Went too far. Went too far. Okay. Finally, I will close. You don't have to clap there. I will close with one of my most recent educational discoveries in Summerville, made possible by a team of African American Christian men and a generous German immigrant. It started with Camel Hill United Methodist Church. It led to a 3-room schoolhouse and cafeteria for black children. According to Mr. Sinclair Mack, this is one of my 90-year-old black sources from Summerville's history. He said Camel Hill Church hosted the first black school in the Niceville area for students who lived too far from Austin Graded School. He said black kids could only go to school 2 or 3 days a week because they had to work in the fields. But the people in the community knew they needed a full-time school. So they formed a committee to make it happen. This committee included men like Odie Singleton, Jimmy Edwards, Calvin Patrick, and Chris Flood. Anybody ever heard any of those names? These men went to a German resident named Martin Lotz. According to Mr. Mack, if you had anything you wanted done, you went to Martin Lotz. Martin Lotz, whose father once owned Shoes Plantation, which is now the Ponds, you know where the Ponds are? That used to be Shoes Plantation. And ran a small sawmill and a cotton gin. He offered to build a school and a lunchroom for free, but they had to supply the labor. You know, in the sawmills, have plenty of wood. Here you go, go build yourselves a school. That school continued the educational opportunity first provided by Camel Hill United Methodist Church. But in many cases, the students had to walk anywhere from 3 to 5 miles one way to school because there was no bus for black kids. For them, that was a small price to pay to get the education they desperately needed and wanted. Now, building a 3-room schoolhouse in a lunchroom was one thing. Staffing it was another. So according to Mr. Mack, the principal of Austin Graded School got the state of South Carolina to promise that if he could get teachers for the school, they would pay the teachers. So he got a lady named Eliza Wins, who taught Mr. Mack in 1st grade in that 3-room schoolhouse. There was also C.S. MacGyver. He taught Mr. Mack all he knows about sports. There was a Mrs. Reeds from Simmons Quarters. If you don't know anything about Simmons Quarters, go watch my lecture on the historic black neighborhoods of Summerville. Very interesting lecture. If you don't know about the black neighborhoods of Summerville, go watch it. And she taught piano lessons for 10 cents a lesson. And last, the wife of Rollin Lemons taught at the school. They were there early enough to build a fire for the kids. Students had to rent the books, so you might have 3 or 4 students reading out of one book. Today, the area where the schoolhouse would have been is located behind Blessed Visions Ministries, just off Orangeburg Road. I know that was a lot, but I love talking about educational opportunities, and I appreciate you being here to listen. Can any of you add any information, provide any comment about the history of education in Summerville, or any questions about freedom through education in Summerville?